Hey, what's up, everyone? Let me know if you can hear me and see me okay. Hey, Java and Shovels, nice to see you guys. Yeah, definitely, Java. Thanks for always watching and supporting. Appreciate ya. Sounds good. Sweet. I'm on a different computer tonight, so if there are any issues, just like let me know, and I will try and fix it so that it's not like unbearable to watch. um, let's see here. Oh, I'm using a different computer, so there might be some. See if I can turn off some of these. So we got Shovels in here. Says have a fun stream and happy New Year to everyone. Thanks, Shovels. Got Brevity Gaming, Professor Birch, Pokebarn, Pokedep Store, Will Chamberlain, Marty S. All names I recognize really well. Appreciate all of you for hanging out tonight. Hope everyone's New Year's was good. I did a little bit of sort of like impromptu, had a little impromptu get together party type thing at my house with some of my closest friends and my girlfriend, and that was really nice. Probably like my ideal way at this age. When I was younger, I used to go into crowds a little bit more or go out, but this age now it feels more just having like a few people over and playing some board games, having a few drinks was eating some bad food for us. It was a fun way to spend it. So hopefully you guys had a good New Year's and are feeling rejuvenated. Hopefully this year will be a good year for people out there. Got you say booyah, John Doe, Lord Narwhal Como. So for tonight, the goal, I do want to start with just maybe giving you guys some of my thoughts on where I think the Pokemon market may go this year. Give some general thoughts and predictions, and also just like take questions, have a conversation with you guys about where you all think it's going to go. So if people do have questions, feel free at any point to start putting them in the chat, Pokemon market stuff, and I'll get to them sort of in order of where they appear. But to start, so I guess I'll start with last year a little bit. So I think overall, most things last year, particularly when we talk about your upper 10% of sort of vintage card type items. Generally speaking, I would say that you're looking at sort of they were mostly flat last year to down maybe 10, 15, up to 20, maybe 30% on some cards. For those who don't follow this channel or don't follow the market too much, that is sort of overall what we've seen most. Now there are some examples of certain vintage cards in certain eras that actually went up in value, where we saw 5, 10, 15%. There are cards that doubled in value, like low pop, niche, particularly some Japanese cards from like middle era sets that maybe also didn't sell that much and then had like one or two really high sales. I'm always cautious, when something doesn't sell a lot, and you see kind of one sale at this level and then you see it double on the next sale, you should be pretty cautious to be like, that's the new market for it, just going off of one comp and making a huge statement about how that card's doubled in value. I think it's better to just sort of have a general sense of the trend, a general sense of where everything is. So, and then as far as modern, if we want to just talk about like Sword and Shield, we've had a number of cards that were very hot out of the gate, which is just a common pattern for anyone who's in any of these markets, knows often cards come really hot out of the gate. Like if there's a new set and there's a new chase card, that card sells for a really high amount, particularly graded in PSA 10. There's a little bit of a chase to be sort of the first one to grade it. People pay a premium. And then there's there's a premium price paid on that. A good example, might be like the Pikachu from Vivid Voltage. And then generally speaking, when more supply hits the market and more get graded, the price comes down. Now that's happened pretty much across the board for most of the big chase cards in Sword and Shield initially, but then we saw cards that from that low point get back up to or even higher than they were selling even at the beginning when they were first released, which is just shows that there's a ton of demand, and that even though more and more supply, a good example would be like the Moonbreon or certain alt arts, that even though the supply was a lot lower, 3, 4, 5 months ago, theoretically there's more supply on the market. There was enough consistent demand and people buying them up that it kept the price sort of at where it's at or even pushed it up. Now we've seen prices on those items come back down from some of the heights they hit a month ago or a couple of months ago. But overall, when you have the Moonbreon go from $300-400 and maybe a PSA 10 back up to 600-700 800. Obviously, it hit a peak at like 1500. We saw a lot of those cards move in somewhat of that trajectory, which is interesting. When we look at the modern booster boxes, they have mostly done, particularly ones that have been out at least 5-6 months now, have done really well. Really, you have your Evolving Skies that has basically tripled in value from where you could have bought it after sort of the second reprint of it, the big second reprint, which would have been the best time to buy that one. And then you have other sets sitting at $120, $140, $110, $100, $90, but all sort of doing well. When you talk about your main sets, all solid demand for that. Be interesting to see what things like the Charizard UPC does. Ton of that's printed, pushed the price down quite a bit from that 125 price point where it started. Be interesting to see if that gets gobbled up and prices go back up on that. So that's sort of just to set the stage of kind of like where we're at right now, with everything. Examples of very specific niche low pop cards going up in price, setting record highs, but any set card from sort of middle gen to the oldest vintage stuff pretty much is either that sells a lot is pretty much kind of flat to down, sort of that 5, 10, 15, 30% over the last year. And then of course the year before, most of those cards had a much bigger drop. Of course, before that, most of those cards went up 10, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times in value. So they're still sitting at 3, 4, 5 times in value in most cases from where they were in 2019, 2020. So hopefully that's a good sort of update for those who are unaware of those things. So let's talk predictions for next year. So obviously there could be a pretty wide range of outcomes this year, and I guess I will just start this by saying that I certainly don't see any obvious right in this moment right now. I can see no obvious reason to think that we're going to have the same type of events that led to the huge run up a few years ago. And some combination of stimulus checks, of people being more at home, looking for sort of an indoor online hobby, not spending as much money on other types of entertainment or things that require you to go be in person, go outside, that type of stuff, kind of funneling into these types of hobbies. A lot of people looking to create businesses and work from home and flip and do things that all of that. We saw huge growth across sort of most collectible hobbies, even though cards in general and Pokemon specifically, even within that has been sort of one of the biggest winners, if not the biggest winner. We can also say, well, that's also likely due to the fact that it was very undervalued based on how big the IP is and how many people loved and collected these cards when they were kids. And now that they're aware of them and can afford them in their 30s, they're willing to pay a lot more for them than they were than the market was willing to pay for them, 3 years ago. So I don't see I don't see how some combination of those events are going to push prices up in an extreme way this year. You never know with these things, but I definitely would not count on that. And I don't think there's any even very realistic scenario where that happens. I mean, the one thing my brain can think about is some sort of just like a phenomenal, like game changing type of like video game or movie, some sort of thing that like there's another sort of cultural moment around Pokemon where like a lot more adults become interested, a lot more ages become interested, and even maybe older adults become interested who didn't grow up with Pokemon. Because I think that there's a whole group of like sports card collectors, Marvel card collectors, Star Wars card collectors, etc., who aren't into Pokemon because they didn't grow up with it. Maybe they're 5, 6, 7 years older than me, and if there was some sort of like really fun, amazing movie story that could bring more people into the franchise who are older and adults my age who didn't get into it during this period, but that could bring them in, that would be the type of thing. Again, uh, I don't think it's makes sense to count on that type of thing. So putting that sort of event aside, which I think is I don't know 1% chance, 2% chance of something like that happening. Um, I think that leaves like the more realistic option, the more realistic options. I also think we're looking at like 1-2%, just maybe a little higher 5% sort of catastrophic sort of economic environment where we have mass job layoffs that are like the worst. Some sort of macroeconomic situation where we get into a terrible, terrible economy continues to worsen, and maybe they get a handle on inflation, but the policy changes and the overall state of a wide variety of businesses gets to the point where they have to like do mass layoffs, and that just dramatically impacts like all markets and very much I think collectible markets that depend on sort of average people being able to like buy and treat themselves to these types of items. So I think that there's always a chance something like that happens. There's always a chance there's a huge boom. I think more likely though, we're going to be somewhere in the middle, where I would expect another, flat to slightly negative to maybe slightly positive year. I would lean slightly more to the slightly negative than I would to the slightly positive, just ever so slightly. But I think anything within that range, and I think it will depend largely on the amount of supply that comes back from PSA, particularly when we talk about vintage. I think that if the vintage supply, if we really start to see some of these set cards not get graded anymore, particularly in like 9 and 10, and even if that starts to come into the eights a little bit, I do think that you could see a nice sort of like then gradual price increase on this stuff as they start getting bought up by them from the market by collectors, and they're not being replaced by supply, which is where I think we're at right now. Um, unless the demand really decreases and more people decide to leave the hobby this year, which is possible. I mean, if I had to guess, do I think there's going to be net more people coming this next year or net more people leaving? I would have to guess net more people leaving, because so many people so enthusiastically came in over the last couple of years that I expect, when someone's been here 5, 6, 7, 8 years already, it's more likely they'll still be here, for a longer period of time. When someone's only been in it for a year, it's probably more likely that they're going to decide not to keep going with it, or even if they're super into it. And I think that that I it's probably more likely that more of those people may leave like slightly than more of the same type of people come for this year, maybe. And then we'll see some sort of equilibrium point where the same amount of people who are constantly leaving are constantly coming for a while without some sort of like big stimulus on the market, as I said, like a video game or a movie or something that could bring a lot more people back in. So that's how I see things. I do think that the amount that like if you are a collector, so one thing I would say is like, I haven't I haven't invested from a purely or even mostly investment mindset into Pokemon in 3 years. Outside of maybe a few purchases of sort of like mid-gens and Sun and Moon stuff that I thought, I could see this stuff appreciating over time, and I think it's kind of undervalued right now. By and large, I have really just been buying as a collector or in some cases as more of a flipper. And I still have that plan for the next year. I do think though that if you're really buying as a collector purely, you're not trying to make money and you're okay with things going slightly down or staying around the same. If you can particularly be patient and buy things in auction at a really good value, even if things like if you had all year been buying things at really good value and really low auctions, you could probably still sell that item now for more than you paid for it, even if the market has fallen 5, 10, 15 to 20% on that item. And that's the type of mindset that I would have for collecting is sort of like be patient, go after the things that are a little bit harder to find, a little bit rare. Less of that pop's going to come on the market. That type of mindset is the one that I would still have. I don't think that I certainly would not have the mindset that my cards are gonna triple, barring again like that one maybe scenario that I talked about. It would require that massive increase in demand from something like that, mixed with probably finally the supply is drying up. Now, in the long run, if we talk 5, 10, 15 years, whatever, do I think there'll come a point if we stay in this sort of equilibrium period where about the same number of people are coming in and out of the hobby, but more and more money over time is being spent. Like people aren't just like selling their whole collections every time they leave. They keep what they have, and more of those kind of like vintage, lower pop or mid-gen, lower pop stuff gets put into collections. I would expect the prices on things to drift up over time. But and then there could be moments where you see big increases, from one sale to the next because, hey, like I used to be able to buy this PSA 10, like there used to be like 3 on the market at any one given time, and now I haven't seen one for 4, 5, 6 months. And that's when some more of that FOMO can kind of come back in, that psychology of like, instead of I'm just going to sit here and wait for prices to go down and sort of that buyer sort of market psychology, um, you can get into that seller's market psychology where it's who knows when the next one of this item is going to be. And I think that's been a big piece of what's been missing these past couple of years is there's more of a feeling of like, if I buy this, I'm going to lose money. And if I buy this, I'm going to, it's going to continue to come down in price, and there's going to be more options to buy it cheaper. Until that psychology shifts, because finally there isn't just continuously kind of more supply at lower prices on the market of the item that you're engaged in. Like once that psychology shifts, that's when it will start to go back up. And we're going to see that happen for different cards at different times. And the thing you can control for is the supply. The thing you can't control for is the demand. We have a reasonably good sense of how much supply there are of some things. Again, reasonably good, at least relative to other things. So I would continue to sort of place my longer term bets on like the lower supply things, as long as it also has good fundamentals that you think there's always going to be demand for it. Quite a bit of demand for it. I do think some people, paying $1,500, $2,000 for like a holo of a second tier Pokemon from a mid-gen set just because it's like a pop 2 or something like that. I really have no idea how that's gonna work out. But more so thinking like your, base set first edition, your jungle, your fossil, your gold stars, your E series, your Neo Gen, like watching those pops and trying to get in at prices that you really like. Again, I would not do it for investment purposes. I would just be patient and wait. I'd be investing in like more traditional assets. That's what I do personally. Again, just telling you my opinion, what I do like personally when I really think about like safe investments in the long run. But as far as like I'm a collector, I enjoy this stuff, and I don't want to way overpay, and I don't want my item to like plummet to the ground. That's sort of my thinking, and I think we'll continue to see some of that. And I'll let you guys know, obviously, if I feel any different dynamic in the market or see anything significant shifting. Yeah, so again, I think if you buy at good auction prices, you should continue to be pretty okay, even now I think the stuff that is more modern and has the higher supply is just a lot more volatility. You're depending a lot more on demand. Like you're depending on demand to continue to be really strong and consistent. And as soon as the demand for like those popular alt arts like move on to like the next modern thing, but more and more of those alt arts continue to be graded and hit the market, the price will fall. Now if the alt arts don't decrease in demand and the demand stays really strong and is kind of even with that slow kind of increase in supply over time, the one nice thing that alt arts has is they're very difficult to pull. And so even though more and more are hitting the market, and there are thousands of PSA 10s graded already of some alt arts, um, it's not going to be the speed that like a baby shiny could be graded at or an amazing rare could be graded at, or an even better example might be those are good examples, but an even better example might be something like a Charizard promo that comes in every product, or a Greninja Gold Star, or things that there are a mass amount of them. They're easy to automatically get, and if the price is too high on them, you're going to have someone like me, or even more so probably like Dan, Catch 'em All Collectibles, see that um, that he can make some profit there, buy up a ton of it, grade a bunch of it, sell a bunch of it, and that then kind of push the price down on it. So yeah. So let's jump into some questions. I'm not sure if there's anything else big that I want to say. I do think it's important to be very clear with you guys that like I am not and have not for the last 3 years by and large bought a single Pokemon card as an investment play, as some sort of long-term investment play. Do I think that there's upside on them, and do I think that they can continue to float up over time? And do I think that hopefully some of my items will be quite a bit more expensive than they will? And what we hope happens is Pokemon stays thriving, and et cetera, et cetera. Yes, but it's actually the other card games and the things that I think are less established, or some occasionally like a random niche thing in Pokemon that I really think is undervalued that I would invest in. And when I say invest, I mean for the long term, that I think it's like very undervalued currently by the market, and I'm willing to sort of hold it until I think the market more correctly values it, versus flipping, which is more of a mindset, which can be a kind of investing, but it's more like, I didn't buy those Evolving Skies boxes, like a lot of those at 95, wanting to hold for 5 to 10 years. That was not my thought process. My thought process was hopefully this goes back up to 160, 180. When I thought there was a decent chance it would go to 160, 180, and then I would sell all of them. And then I got lucky or fortunate that it went even higher than that, which surprised me. And I sold some of it at 180 to 190, and then a lot more at 240, 250, 260. But that was not an investment, long-term hold belief in these types of boxes. It was a short-term seeing kind of what was happening in the market and understanding that at 95, chances were pretty decent that I was either going to be able to flip them back in the market and make no money, you know, as sort of the low end result, to the high end result of being able to flip it back and sort of double my money quickly, or after fees and shipping, not quite double my money at 180, 190 for sure, but still make a solid 70, 80% or something in a short period of time. Um, but I want to say, and I just saw Dusinder say, so it seems like you don't believe in Pokemon anymore. I'd be happy to work a deal with you on your question. So I think and I know you're joking partially, but I think it's really important to say that like I really have the same perspective on Pokemon. I feel like I've changed my trajectories a little bit on some modern stuff, but overall I have sort of the same theories and thesis and belief long term. When I say something isn't a good investment, what I really mean is it going to outperform and outcompete my traditional investments of like real estate and stocks. And do I think it's worth the risk that even if it does, is it worth the risk of it not? That's all I mean by that. It's not me saying that it can't go up, or even saying that it can't end up being a good investment. Would I be stunned if my Pokemon cards from right now outperform my stock portfolio over the 10 to 15 years. I think it's unlikely and not worth the risk, but I don't think it's impossible. And I do think there are scenarios, particularly with lower pop stuff, lower supply stuff that still has really good demand that for some reason is maybe a little bit cooler right now. You know, that would be the stuff that I would target. But for most people, if you're also flipping and you're also like if you're buying large collections and you're getting them way undervalued and you're getting a lot of like mint cards that you can grade yourself undervalued, there's so much you're getting it so much under market that like you're allowing yourself to both have a flipping option to make money and to kind of cash out right away, and you're looking at a potential, particularly with some of the maybe the items you think are going to do the best over time or you like the best, to keep that in your collection. That's how I've sort of built what I've had and what I've done, and that's what I would suggest. So I'm gonna go back to the top here, and we're gonna go through who is Hatchake. We got our Cardinal gaming hat, of course. My buddy Mason. Go support Mason, friend of mine, great guy in the community. Gotta wear the Mason hat for the first live stream of the year. Gotta support my man. Um, let's see. Okay, so we start with think the overall market cap will grow for Pokemon. So if we're just talking about the next year, I guess my most likely prediction is sort of no, and that we might be looking at more of like a flat to down. If I like gun to my head, forced to guess, I think though there's quite a large uh, what's the word? There's quite a lot of variance that could happen, and so I think when you're buying any of this, you should be aware of that variance. And it would be not particularly helpful to me to be like, yes, for sure, or like definitely not. Even though uh, people might prefer that, or some people might prefer that. I think most people would prefer an honest answer. Do I think in the long run, in the long term? Gosh, I hope so. And I think that one thing we have to be careful with is we, just because we love something and we really want other people to love it and we want it to succeed and we want to be part of something really cool and we want to keep our cards, we don't want to have to sell them, and we really enjoy this process and being here. It doesn't mean that other people are going to feel that way, and it doesn't mean that newer generations and that multiple generations are going to feel that way. And so I think there are very realistic reasons to believe why. And for me, it's worth it. Like the risk is worth it because of how much I enjoy it. And I'm taking money out of the hobby. And at the end of the day, I'm not dependent on my cards or my card collection to fund my living expenses and to fund my life. And only because of those things am I comfortable with owning so much product and owning so many cards. It's a risk reward calculation for me. And no one here knows the answer to this. As strong as someone's opinion might be, they definitely do not know the answer to it. And they can say, well, Pokemon's always grown in the past, or it's just cardboard and it's stupid and it's worthless. And this is probably the high, like both of those takes are sort of like, sure. But it's going to depend on sort of how the actual broader market feels, the majority of people here feel. I love this stuff. I'm going to continue to be here. I like it as much now as I did in the beginning. And I certainly want to help the hobby grow and help. I don't want to tell people things that make them like not excited, but what's even more important to me is to not tell people things that allow them to make bad financial decisions for themselves or help them justify things that they probably shouldn't be doing. And I think that the only way you can really enjoy this hobby too and not burn out is if you figure out how to not overspend, if you figure out how to collect what you love, you know, or you flip quite a bit and are turning this into a business where you're constantly taking money out of the hobby. I think that otherwise, you're more at risk to kind of not enjoy it or to overspend or yeah. But I do think Pokédeps are right. I mean, the argument will always be there, and the cheaper, like if a lot of people left Pokemon this year and things got a lot cheaper, there would come a point where I would start to invest in Pokemon more probably again, unless I felt like the IP was somehow significantly damaged. And that's because really investing, when something gets cheaper, if you think it has basically the same fundamentals, it actually becomes more desirable, which is the opposite of how a lot of people invest. A lot of people only think things are valuable when they're going up or when they're very expensive, and then they say like I was right, and justify sort of their thinking based on a high price point. That's very dangerous. That's not how you should invest fundamentally in anything. You should have your sort of assessment of how valuable you think something should be, and then if it's way below that, it might be a good investment. If it's way above that, probably a good time to sell if you're correct in your assessment. Um, so I do think if things went down considerably, I could start viewing Pokemon as more of an investment vehicle, more of a decent investment again. It's certainly a much better potential investment now than it was during the boom. I mean, for anyone who was watching my channel back then, you guys know every video I said, don't buy anything, or I'm not buying anything. I wouldn't touch any Pokemon. I think it's crazy. I think these prices are crazy. I think people who are buying don't understand how much supply is. There's a ton of irrationality in the market. We're not in that position anymore. Now we're in more of a position of like, I think most people buying know what they're buying a little better, particularly for the mid-gen to vintage stuff, and have a little bit more of a realistic sense of what these items could possibly do price wise. And because of that, they're more likely to be making decisions for their collection and decisions that will stabilize the market. Like I can buy and afford this item at this price, and I'm not going to just try to flip it back into the market immediately. I actually enjoy the item and can afford it. And that's what helps these hobbies and prices go up in a more sustainable way. FOMO, it creates bubbles basically, and greed of like I'm going to become rich creates bubbles inherently in any market. Um, Will Chamberlain says, "Do you see Crown Zenith going the same as V Star Universe hype wise, or do you think Universe may have killed the hype leading to a lackluster release?" So I am, just to be completely honest, Will, like I am not super up on. I've been like pretty busy um, with my new sort of other job as well. And I've been mostly focused on like mid-gen and vintage prices and like Sword and Shield prices, and I have not really focused on like the most modern sets. And so I have to give credit to like the Discord. To most of the information I get is from like people like just quickly seeing what people are saying about it, rather than sort of me doing my own research and forming my own opinion. So I do want to look into this, and see how some of these like the newest sets are doing, and would love to hear your opinion, Wilt, or anyone else's opinions on the new set for sure. If people want to put it in the chat for people, because I think watching new sets and watching the strength of new sets is actually, very important to how, and can be related to sort of how everything is doing, and the general sort of health of everything in the hobby. Oftentimes there's a lot of like, this market and this market, and this and that, and there are differences and things move differently, but there's also uh, um, patterns that emerge, and certainly one pattern that we don't want to see, or that nobody wants to see, is modern sets becoming unpopular and people not interested in them or not buying them, or feeling that they're boring or repetitive, or that would not be good for any part of the hobby if your goal is for more people to come in the hobby, and for the prices to remain fairly stable. um, John Doe says lots of interesting changes going into SMB. Silver borders, MSRP rise, but Pokemon is going strong, making popular new arts. Zenith will be loved. Sort of well in price. I know there's been a lot of demand on the Japanese side, for these new sets. We see that in the prices, and I've also just heard it from a number of people that sell and that do booster box breaks, that like they're selling really well. There's a lot of demand and interest. I mean, Pokemon is still doing great. Like it's hot. People are loving the cards, and one thing I've said is that from a long-term sort of like investment speculative standpoint, the change from the yellow borders to the silver borders is going to help differentiate eras and create probably more value around different eras, and it's sort of a collectible distinction of, oh, I collect this era. Ooh, in 15 to 20 years, if Pokemon's still going hot and kids are collecting cards, you'll be like, oh, here's a card with a yellow border. That means that it's from Sword and Shield era, this like old era, right? And so for people who are speculating and investing on Sword and Shield and believe that it will do really well over time, that's definitely possible. And that this is a positive news. This is good news. Like anything that will create sort of a distinction between sets, and that like this is the last era, maybe ever. Now, Pokemon could easily go back to yellow, and that would defeat that. But those types of things are like really good for long-term collectability, distinctions that can be made between eras. In comic books, there are distinctions on like how much the comic books cost. There are distinctions on like the number, like the type of comic book. Like there's in sports, different distinctions based on brands and serialized, and more distinctions creates more collectability. It's not all just the same, and so there's too much supply of everything. But it's like, okay, what are the rare things, and that makes it that's what makes things collectible. So I don't hear people saying that enough. At least I haven't. Maybe people are starting to say that now more on YouTube, but when a lot of people were sort of like, this is negative, this might be bad for the hobby, or I'm going to miss it. I think that there's the collector perspective of like, it's kind of sad of that they're changing it and shifting it for sure, but it also makes it kind of like more special. And I think it's a positive thing actually overall. What's up, man? Thanks for joining. Ancient Mew, good to see you as always. Tyler, pleasure. Alexander, hit that like button. Thank you. Yes, please. If you're enjoying the content, appreciate the channel. That's something you can do for the channel. LDub says, what do you think of the new Star Wars Galaxy Chrome set? I bought a few boxes. First Star Wars I bought, but I like the look of the cards a lot. Yeah, super cool set. A lot of cool arts. There's some Vader arts that I'm definitely going to go after in particular. Unfortunately, it's quite a bit more expensive. The same box, the same set, which is not a it's not a real premium set. It's a good set that Chrome is a good brand of tops. But it's not like the Masterwork boxes, which tend to sell like 300-400, or like the Stellar product, which is like $10,000 out of the gate. The super premium stuff. This used to be $80, this product fresh out of the gate. Now I think tops is like, I think right out of the gate it's more like 250, 300, 350 people are paying for these boxes. So it does show over this last year, there's been a lot more Star Wars demand. You guys know that I was like some of you actually who were pretty engaged in the channel know that I got pretty into that. I'm still pretty into that. There's been quite a bit of increase in demand. There's probably going to be a lot. I'm speculating because I've seen like the pull rates be like fairly low, that they probably printed a lot more of this too. So it's actually harder to pull the good cards. So be careful of those types of dynamics from like a value standpoint. But yeah, cool looking box. Some great looking arts in it. The Galaxy Chrome set from last year was probably the standout set of the year. Despite being kind of a lower price point. So I would expect this set to be really popular too, and do pretty well despite the higher price point. Kind of similar to what happened in Marvel with the metal sets that have the precious metal gems. Like they used to be quite a bit cheaper, they to buy, but then they became a lot more popular. They went up a lot in price, and so the companies raised their the MSRP on the boxes, or what they were charging. They're charging more, and then the distributor's charging more, and then the middlemen, the LGS, the whatever store you're buying for, is also charging more than they used to. One thing I've said in Pokemon is that Pokemon could be charging more probably for boxes than they are. And I know that they've raised prices, but when you have like Evolving Skies at $300 or $260, $280, like, and the fact that like they're still probably charging distributors like, I don't know, I'm making up a complete random number here, but like, let's say they're charging them like $50 or $40 or, 60, but like, there's a lot of money that they're leaving on the table potentially, which is maybe why they would reprint the set again rather than raising the price. But we see some of these other companies, Fanatics, Panini, etc., really raise the prices on their boxes and trying to capture some of that secondary market demand for themselves. Part of why investing or flipping, better to flip in my opinion, like a modern sealed Pokemon makes a lot of sense and has worked really well. Because, and particularly, I mean, on that Japanese side, when we see them selling like shiny GX boxes or like, Pokekayun, like CP6, obviously Pokemon was way less popular back then, but, into and specialty sets that may come out next. And now they have increased the print runs a lot, which has put a lot of downward pressure on them. But like they're still keeping the prices like pretty low and competitive. And like those boxes went up to like $1,500, $2,000 a box that you could buy for like $50 to $100, around the time when it came out. That's a massive increase in a very short amount of time that the Pokemon company is sort of leaving on the table or allowing they're not printing nearly enough to keep the prices low. We'll see if they do more of that in the future. Like I think with this Charizard UPC is a good example of where they seem to not want to leave so much money on the table this time on the secondary market, and they printed maybe a lot more of it. But that's the way we felt for Champion's Path. And initially, Champion's Path came down in price quite a bit. It got a lot of hate. Everyone said it was a terrible set, et cetera, too small, too boring. That hurt the price as well. But now it's doing really well. Now it's like way back up. After getting hit, just because even though Pokemon seemed to have printed a ton of it, it just like still wasn't enough. There's just so much demand. So that's a big argument for why flipping modern sealed, really of Star Wars, of Marvel, like things that are really hot and where prices are really, seeming to continue to push up. Like there's a case to be made to like there's money there on the table. Will it always be there? Do I think there's quite a bit of risk in it? Do I think it's like automatic? Absolutely, it is not. And anyone telling you or quoting the past price history as proof of future price history, as like guaranteed proof is misleading you. And you just really need to be aware that it's not a guarantee, but the odds may be in your favor for some of these things. And depending on your current financial situation, maybe it's worth doing. That's up for each individual, out there to decide. TCG Caravan says perfect time for live listing singles on eBay. Very time consuming. Awesome. Good for you. Definitely increasing those sales, having more inventory, even if it's time consuming and doesn't pay you like a huge amount per hour type of thing, as much as maybe higher end slabs would, of course, can still be very good for building a business. And hopefully it's fun to make more sales, get your presence out there, get your what's it called, your reviews up, your star up. What do you think of TCA's gaming play on the SDDC? So I am not up on like everything that's going on right now. I apologize again, Alex. If you want to tell me below what he's doing or what Rusty's play is, I'd be happy to give my 2 cents on it. So I did see him a while ago buy a ton of special delivery Charizards, right? Like, I don't know exactly the prices he was paying for them and like how much it's come down since then, and if he's like underwater or like he got them for so cheap that he's still going to do fine, or like what he plans to do with them. But Fat Belly Younger says, as a viewer and participant, I love the call-in shows. When is the next one? Hopefully in like the next couple of weeks for sure, man. It's been a little bit. I'm gonna definitely come back to doing weekly lives. Unless I'm doing quite a bit of traveling for work right now and for business, and there may be some times where it's just like I absolutely can't because of where I'm at. But I really want to be committed to. I really enjoy making these videos. It's a really fun part of my week to just come on here and hang out with people who like the same thing that I do. And so I really do want to be committed again to doing it. And one of my favorite things to do, one of the things that I was like kind of most proud of, honestly, was the live call-in shows, because it's trying to bring new faces, like new people who people have never heard of. I wish more people would come on. Like, it's great having you on. It's great having other people on. I wish we had like lots of new faces always. And I would encourage people, hopefully as I become maybe more active again and we start building the channel again, we will find kind of bring new people into the community who will want to share their viewpoints, want to have discussions, and my favorite thing is to like talk to people, real people, and get their perspectives and just yeah, hang out. So I'm with you. They're fun. Um, got Ray in the house. What's up, man? Let's see. Um, Sleepy Breathing says, "Hey Jake, can we get a small room tour? Interested in what's on the shelves, generally speaking. Maybe we could do that. Yeah, I have the shelves are like fairly deep, and so although you can see like here, I don't have a lot of stuff on the back there. A lot of the other shelves do have quite a bit of stuff in the back. A lot of just like random stuff. That's be like kind of fun that maybe people get a kick out of. Most of the Pokemon sealed product is over on those two shelves and some more down low. And then I have a lot of it, kind of more of a lot of the bulk stuff stored in plastic boxes in a basement um, on a shelf, trying to keep them away from moisture and water. Um, but um, but yeah, yeah. And then I have my like I have binders. I have a lot of binders that out here that you can't see. I have some art actually. Yeah, I can show you like I have like little pieces of art like around the room. Like I actually had more, but it fell off the wall, and I want to make sure it's secure. But I have just like little things. This is actually really cool. This is uh something that a watcher of the channel drew for me. I don't know if he wants his name shown, but he's actually an artist, and it's a really cool piece. Um, People have sent me like art and little bits here and there in mail over the channel, and I have that saved and kind of put in places around the room. I also have a display case where I put a lot of my PSA cards in on the wall over here and over here. So yeah, maybe we'll do a little bit more of a room tour at some point. I love that piece of art though, and he's one of the people who like supported me like really early on in the channel, and just like a lovely guy. Uh, and Yeah. John says everyone sleeves their chase cards and Pokemon prints a ton, but the alt art portraits are atrocious. With still not great quality control, which will keep the all price elevated. Yeah, I mean, I think certainly compared to amazing rares, these types of things. But you have to understand that like a lot of that's already priced in, right? Because people know that, people are aware of that, and people are spending a lot of money. I mean, no amazing rare ever got to $1,500 for a PSA 10, for a good reason, for supply reason. And as far as their ability to hold, I do think that there's a decent argument to be made that because less will continue to come on the market, and maybe a good portion of it is already on the market, that it'll slowly trickle onto the market rather than like flooding the market. Like with baby shinies and amazing rares, when PSA opened and starting to get their card and starting to get people's cards back, the market has just been completely oversaturated and flooded. Those cards were really loved, like really well received. People really liked those cards and were chasing after those cards when they first came out. There are lots of people who like the baby shinies better than the full arts, than the full art shinies when that set first came out in Shiny GX. So things that can be very well received. If there's too much supply and the prices go down, then people don't want them anymore. People tend to want expensive things. I was going to make a video because I just sold a card recently for like $2,100 in PSA 10 that I was giving a few of those copies away like for free basically because they were like 10 to 20 to $30 a few years ago. And because no one wanted them, no one desired them. But now that they're really expensive, like people really want them and really desire them. So it's just this, you want to be at the other side. You want to be buying things that people for some reason are way undervaluing rather than buying things that are like the hottest, sort of you want to be a contrarian generally speaking, in my view. um Are you excited for the Yu-Gi-Oh! 25th anniversary booster box reprint? So I don't know too much about this, but I have heard that like LOB is going to be reprinted, and um, I don't know like what else is going to happen, but for sure I'm gonna like engage in that when it does. I, I'm not. I enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! Quite a bit. I was a big fan of like the anime as a kid, and it is cool that like the cards are like the exact cards from the show, or else I like wouldn't be into it, to be honest. Uh, but yeah, they're cool. I got some of the Korean Yu-Gi-Oh boxes up there. Jake, what are your thoughts on both XY and Sun and Moon now that we are moving into um, Violet? Do you see people losing interest in them, or do you see a possible resurgence of interest in tag team? Um, yeah, hard thing to predict, obviously, right? I do think that like of these eras, the one that will likely be hit the most in interest will be the Sword and Shield era, and I would expect more. First of all, there's a lot more interest and engagement in Sword and Shield than there is Sun and Moon and X and Y and some of these earlier eras. So I would expect it to be less impacted by that. Like the people who already love that will still be engaging in there, and maybe some people will start to drift back into that, and others will really kind of move. We're always sort of into the modern stuff and the stuff that is the most uh, current, because they love opening product and building sets by opening. Um, but yeah, I don't really have anything too bright, I think, to say on this one that isn't like probably fairly obvious. Tag team. I mean, all of these things are expensive. Is my thing with this stuff. It's like tag team's already very expensive for being a set that's only like some of these sets are only like 4 years old, right, or less. Excuse me, like 3 years old, 2 years old, right? It's like they're already like really expensive sets, and it's because they were fairly low printed, and then there's like a huge increase in demand, and they didn't go back and like reprint them a ton, and there's a lot more Sword and Shield block printed. So it's when you have $800, 700, $600 boxes, $1,000 boxes, that it was at one point of like a team up or something. Um, that feels very expensive to me already. So I wouldn't like, I already think there is quite a bit of interest, quite a bit of demand, quite a bit of engagement. For those who really feel like vintage and like really old, I would expect kind of more time. More time would be needed. But yeah, I mean, I've made some bets on some of the full arts from those sets that I've bought already graded that I thought was fairly cheap. Some bets on rainbow rares from Sun and Moon era, from these are fairly difficult to grade, very difficult to pull cards out of already very expensive boxes that are going for considerably less than their secret rare counterparts in Sword and Shield right now. So I think that those things feel somewhat undervalued relative to maybe the newer eras and older eras even. But otherwise, I think things are probably pretty well priced. I think something like Hidden Fates will very likely, in my opinion, if Pokemon continues to do well, have a moment again where people are like very into Hidden Fates, where we see like massive openings from like PokeRev and like whoever's doing the big channels, at the time. But that could take a really long time. Like that could be many years. I think most people who are still here probably got into it around that time, have already opened it a bunch, have already collected it a bunch, and also with Shining Fates being similar, aren't particularly interested in opening that again, particularly for the price point that it's at now. But I could see people being really happy rediscovering that set in a number of years and being nostalgic for that time. I think I will be. With how many people came into the hobby, I'm sure a lot left already, but a lot are here to stay now. Yeah, yeah, and sort of figuring out where we're at in that process. And I think too, it's like, most of us, I mean, the vast majority of us that are here now are not going to be like super engaged in this every year, every month of our lives. Like we can also come and go, and at times be a little bit more engaged, at times be a little less engaged, but overall that should kind of like even out and equal out, you'd think, rather than there being sort of like a mass amount of people entering, and then of course, because when 90% of people come in at the same time, like those people are going to act similarly to each other, more similar to each other than like the rest of the hobby is going to act versus them, if that makes sense. So they're going to likely move from like the big YouTube channels, so like the small, like they're going to kind of like move together, and they're hearing sort of the same, they're getting sort of like the same advice, the same perspective, and they're sort of into the same things. Obviously, it's a humongous group of people, and they're into all sorts of things. But like generally speaking, there's probably going to be some similarities. And when they get burned out, and when they move on to something else, is also going to be similar. So whenever that is, it might have already been, it probably was already a lot of them. And that's why you saw, you know, prices fall like a really huge amount a year and a half ago now to 2 years ago. Yeah, that's what I would say about that. John Charter says, what percentage would unemployment have to hit before the market could be flooded with supply? It hit 10% in '09. I would assume it will get close to that. Thoughts on a market in that environment? Yeah. So I mentioned, John, that in my sort of predictions, or like my really kind of very negative scenario, I think that type of thing could really impact all markets, and certainly collectible markets. That's always something that will impact markets. I think that, assuming that will happen next year, or in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or whatever, um, it's something that clearly there's, with the Fed policies, with the supply issues, with inflation, all that, if the Fed does not sort of eventually start to reduce course or continues raising interest rates, there are cases, there are better arguments to be made that like eventually that's going to have a lot more impact on the job market than it already has. And will that hit all at once, and then it will be, then even if they reverse, will it take time to kind of heal? And then how quickly will that sort of spread through the economy? And then how quickly will lots of people losing their jobs impact their ability to buy, luxury sort of fun goods like Pokemon cards? Definitely important, but I think hard to, like, really, really hard to predict. And I certainly wouldn't say there's like a percentage point where I'd be like, that's the percentage point that we would really see the blood in the water. But I think looking historically at sort of what the percentage point was, in a 2008, 2009 is a good thing to do to understand historically. Obviously, every recession period, and or looking way back into like a depression period, has its own there significant, has its own sort of traits, and doesn't necessarily impact all markets equally. And there can be parts of the economy that get hit the worst, and then sort of negatively impact the rest of the economy, but those parts don't get hit quite as bad. So we'll see how it all goes. I'll be here on YouTube talking about it, engaging in those conversations as it happens. And I'm also I do this now full time, where I, investing in stocks and real estate, and for an agency. So I'm certainly reading many articles all the time on this, and I'm hearing many opinions, and opinions of very smart, successful people differ on the matter. And I think often the best opinion is that, although it's important to invest in, based on sort of some sort of macroeconomic strategy, you have to understand how limited our ability to predict, macroeconomics. You have your Warren Buffetts who will say, like, basically, like, I can't predict macroeconomic stuff. It's not really worth my time. I'd rather focus on understanding like the fundamentals of the businesses I'm buying, or the fundamentals of whatever asset I'm buying. And then you have people, maybe like a Ray Dalio, who is more sort of like, you know, macroeconomics really important to understand, like, invest more based on sort of macroeconomic trends and macroeconomic future. Both people care about both things. Those are two phenomenal, brilliant, investor minds. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to decide how much can you individually predict something like that, and should you spend a lot of time thinking about it, or should you spend more of that time picking out really good assets that you think over a longer period of time will be more valuable in the future, regardless of sort of speed bumps in the way. Um, Uh, YFN Slow Roast is not exactly a market related question, but why do you think people seem to be hesitant to showcase their collections or cards they really like? I really enjoyed your top 100 cards video. I don't know if that's true or like who exactly you're talking about. I think the reasons why people may not show cards that they like could be a few things. One, they just don't. They're maybe they that feels vulnerable and they don't want to be judged or criticized based on what they collect. Two, maybe they don't want to influence the market. Like if I show some cards, it's going to make people buy them or not buy them or and maybe I don't want to do something like that, or someone else doesn't want to do something like that. Particularly like if I'm am investing or speculating a little in some area, I don't want to show you guys or anyone that I'm like buying up a lot of those cards because I don't want to influence the market. I don't want people to then join me in the buyout, which could be good for me, could be bad for me, depending on how much of the items I own. But like that's not how I want to. I don't want to be like a pump and dump influencer, right? I don't want to impact the market ideally. This channel is more for hanging out and talking about sort of like broader topics within the hobby that aren't so like, hey, go out. These are the top 5 things to buy right now. You should go buy them, type of thing. Um, let's see. John one says, "What do you think of modern sealed product as a long hold for 5+ years? Booster boxes, Pokemon Center ETBs, and regular ETBs, ultra premium products." Honestly, I have no idea, Johnny. I I think that I think that it's reasonable to argue that these newer boxes will not do what the older boxes have done because so many more were printed and because in the past people who are like very pro every booster box will appreciate over time. They're coming at it from a moment in history when that's true, which is right now, because demand is always increased in Pokemon over time. And so the supply, like every generation before us right now, there was less Pokemon cards produced outside of like the original Mania, like base set, Jungle, maybe, right? But like every era after that, I think that's very safe to say. So because of that, they because demand like doubled or tripled or quadrupled or whatever with each era, the amount of supply that was from the old era was not nearly enough to meet the demand of all these new people coming in, and so that greatly increased the price. That may not happen for this era. Now we've seen it happen already in the sense that there's not enough evolving skies right now at all on this market. And whether that's because investors are buying it up or whether because collectors are buying it and opening it, like it doesn't matter. For right now in this moment, there's not nearly enough. Now, does that mean that it's going to continue to go up once it reaches a sort of equilibrium point? It might continue to drift up, but will it do that sort of like all of a sudden now it's 1,000? Only if in my opinion, if the overall demand in Pokemon jumps up again in sort of the next generation, like it did in this one. I don't see a reason why that would happen. I think that we're at a pretty nice kind of, not maybe not an all-time peak, hopefully, but a sort of like 15, 10, 5, 10, 15 year peak, on both, if we take sort of, so maybe it's going to take another 7, 8 years for there to be more demand than there was sort of the last year, and something like that into the future. And so I would hesitate to invest a lot of money in this stuff thinking like this is very guaranteed. And in fact, like to me, that would be a good scenario if we have another peak in 7 to 8 years that like rivals sort of the amount of people in the hobby as there were a year and a half ago. That would be really great. And still, I'm not sure it would make sense to buy it now. Like you should probably buy it in like a few years. I think if you're going, this is what I do. This is just what I do. Because I do speculate and flip a bit, of modern sealed, right? And what I do is I try to pick what I think is going to be sort of the best set or one of the better sets, and I try to buy a lot of it after what I think is going to be the biggest reprint. It's all guesswork, right? Like they could do an even bigger reprint. They could reprint a massive amount of Evolving Skies. They could like double or triple. I don't think they're going to, but they could double or triple the amount of supply in the market right now, which would dramatically shift the market. Okay, and so as of right now, I bought at the optimum time, but they could print enough that it would lower the price immediately back to $80 theoretically. Do I think they're going to do that? No, but my point just being you're playing sort of a dangerous game if you're like, I think this second reprint is going to be the biggest one. I think this is the lowest it's ever going to be, and this is what I'm going to buy, and then I'm going to hold, and I think it's going to go up from here. It's like it's not a terrible gamble, but just understand that there's some gambling element in that. Is what I would say. And when we get out 5, 10, 15 years, you're really just betting on the fact that there's going to be more people in Pokemon, or around the same amount of people in Pokemon. And of course, one thing that is very good about sealed product is more and more is getting opened up over time. And that is a really, rather than like, if I would much rather invest or speculate in modern sealed product than I would like modern graded cards. I think in many cases, modern PSA 10 cards, particularly from Sword and Shield, will be the worst performers of anything from that era. Like I think raw and grading yourself, or or buying sealed after it's been reprinted is very, so even if they all perform good, that's probably going to perform the best is what I would guess compared to everything else. And clearly it has the least risk. And we've seen this, like Evolutions is a great example. Like if you had bought the sealed product, even at the height, you would have only lost like 30%, or there are people buying it like 1,500, 1,400, and now it's like what, 800, somewhere in there. So there are people who lost like 50%, but the Charizard from that set, like in a PSA 9, for example, like that was selling at $1,500 at one point, and now it's like $80, $90. That's a massive decrease, and that's just because there was just so much supply of that card that hit the market. Alt-Arts will never have that much supply, very likely. They printed so much Evolutions, and that card was extremely easy to pull versus an Alt-Art. So there are differences for sure, but that's the type of math that I'd be doing, and I think that if you were really bullish on this type of stuff, it's why I think sealed product makes a lot of sense from a risk reward perspective. And I don't think it's stupid. By the way, I think a lot of people who are investing or speculating in modern sealed right now or Alt-Arts are not doing it in a stupid way, and they understand the risk, they understand the reward, and they're making a calculation and they think it's worth it. I do think I have run and had some conversations with people that it was like, you're not thinking about some key factors I think are important to think about here. And because of that, I think you're making a mistake. You're too bullish, and thus I think you're probably buying more than you should. And if you were thinking about some of these like negative factors, it would just make you a little less risk averse and you just buy less, right? It doesn't mean you don't need to buy. You can also like buy less of something or just buy some. If you think that there's good upside, but there's also some risk, you could buy a little bit of it or diversify and buy a number of things. There are lots of ways of dealing with that sort of risk. Pokebarn said, not sure if you saw Danny Phantom's video on Evolving Skies comparing Lumion to Gold Stars. Any thoughts on how far that card will drop? I'm not holding one or anything. No, so I mean, how far it will drop. I wouldn't be shocked if it doesn't drop that much further than now. Because it's already dropped. Like, I don't know what it's at right now. And maybe it's come back up because I know the booster boxes have done well and have continued to go up despite that card going way down. But I think that card was at like 1,500. I saw a few sell like maybe 13 to 1,500, and then I saw like it's 600, 700 around then now. So like how far it could continue to drop from there, I have no idea. I don't think that's a ridiculous given how popular that card is right now. Like if you ask like a modern Pokemon card collector, like so many people love that card. That's their favorite card. That's the chase card. That's the card that they want the most. It's not surprising at all that that card is selling for that much, given the amount of now, do I think it's smart to be like more people are going to continue to want that card over time? I don't know. I kind of feel like we're at a really good high point, and probably it's a good point to sell that card into the market into that high point, rather than this like becoming a more important card over time. Like I just maybe in the very very long term, in the short term, I'm just not sure I see that. You know, certainly would have sold. Like I probably would have. I certainly would have sold this card. I certainly would not have held it long enough to make all of the money on. To be honest, like I never would have held it if I did, it was just luck if I would have held it to like the 1500, people who sold into that sort of that hype there. Um, but I also the demand is very real. And if it continues and it's a very difficult card to pull and the boxes are so expensive that people aren't ripping them as much or aren't opening them as much, those are all things that might make that card. I was very, like, very certain that that Evolutions Charizard was going to get destroyed in price. I was very certain that like the Flying Pikachu from that set was going to be destroyed and get destroyed in price. Right. This one I'm far less certain about, and I expect it to not go. I do not expect this card to go down 90% in value over the next year, like I did the Evolutions Charizard. Right. Like this is a card that if it went down 30 to 40%, it would not shock me. If it stayed about the same, it would not shock me. And if it trickled back up over the next year, it wouldn't shock me. I think in the very long term, there are a lot of things that I would be like speculating or investing in this hobby that would not be that card. That I think less supply is going to hit the market. And I think historically speaking, I'm not entirely sold. It's the same narrative that we always hear, guys. Like every set is the best set. It's like, I just heard people saying, I've heard forever people saying that Evolving Skies was the best set ever, and I'm hearing some of those same people say that this new Scarlet and Violet set is the best set ever. Things can really quickly change, and if demand shifts negatively on that card, like it could go down in value significantly. Whereas I don't think demand is going to shift way down on cards that have been out for a long time and have a more of established demand, like a base set Charizard or something. But there could also be more reward in something like that. Clearly, if you had bought that earlier on in the year, there was a lot more reward in a card like that, because when that card first came out, the demand was not nearly as high as it is now. Like that card has like increased in demand as more people have talked about how great it is, and more people have said it's like the best card from this era to each other. Shri says, "Hey Jake, what's changed about your modern striker?" Yeah, so I think the number one thing that I feel, for those who've been watching the channel a long time, I think they would agree with this, that like I've been generally speaking, like pretty good at sort of within a range of sort of having a sense of where things might go and kind of what feels really overvalued, what feels undervalued, et cetera, et cetera. I think modern sealed is the area that I definitely underestimated the most. And it comes from the fact that I was in this hobby before anyone was really talking about modern sealed or anyone was super into modern sealed. And I just did not expect a massive amount of adults to be investing and putting away modern sealed product, and a bunch of people, like so many people coming in the hobby and wanting to open and experience in the opening. And that just like drove prices on a lot of these like modern sealed products like way higher than I ever expected. Now, it also drove this, it drove all of the PSA cards from like all the vintage sets and the middle gen sets way up too. So sort of like everything moved up a huge amount. But if you had asked me back before that, I would have told you I think that the middle stuff and the vintage stuff is like a much better investment or speculative play. And in a lot of cases it has been. But there are certainly cases in some booster boxes and particularly some ETBs, like plastic, like early ETBs, something like evolving, like Evolutions or a team up or some of like the better performing boxes that really went up 10 times in value or even over 10 times in value from sort of trough to peak during $70 to $800 or $900 or $1,000. Or if you want to take, there's some people who probably bought Evolutions booster boxes at 70 and then sold them at like 1,500 or 1,400. Right now, I bought cards at $30 and sold them for $2,000. There are lots of cards like that, particularly when you factor in the fact that I was buying them raw and then grading them myself and then selling them at the peak like that. So, I mean, that type of thing was impossible to achieve. Like the grading premium plus buying a lot of ungraded cards and then grading them and then selling them, like that people who did that, like myself, like Z&G Import, like others, we were the people like that would have made you more than buying any sealed product, maybe outside of like a Plasma Storm EGB or like a few things that like 30x also, and he's like crazy returns. But what really surprised me is and you know what? Now I'm just thinking, what really surprised me even more were the Japanese boxes, like the CP6, the Poke Kayun. I was really surprised. And I still I don't like the move to all of those things and the fact that like people love that stuff so much. I still do not get. Like, I don't get why someone's paying like multiple $1,000s for like this tiny box from like a middle era that they didn't grow up in. I don't quite understand it, to be completely honest. And I really like Japanese cards. Like Japanese is probably like 40% of my collection. I still don't really get it, but it is what it is. And so my modern trajectory has changed because I have to understand that like, whoa, like at least for the time being, there's this whole new thing happening in Pokemon. And this whole new thing happening, and you can see it with all these people online opening product all the time, with all these new people ripping packs, with all these new people investing sealed and putting it away. Like, Rudy from Alpha Investments was like probably like the only person in Pokemon. He wasn't even in Pokemon, and he was putting Pokemon away into his like Pokemon bathroom. Like I think and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but like I think like even people like I won't say their names, but like big people in this hobby, they used to say, I don't really think it's that investable, but like I just put a box away in the closet just in case it goes up. That was the attitude. Think about how few of those boxes were stored away when you had the biggest influencers in the hobby only putting away a case or something in the back just so that they could open it up later or maybe sell it, or maybe 2 cases in the back, versus now when all those guys are putting like 50 cases in the back, plus you have like tons of just like viewers and like random people who are just like who are even just like new to the hobby and not watching channels. I don't mean random in a negative way, just like people who were not who no one is sort of aware of, or who does this privately, is like putting sealed in their closet in all sorts of places. So, we're in a very different time period with all that, and all of that is negative, but you still can't ignore the fact that like where prices are at on some of these items. And so even if I for sure do not think that some of these booster boxes right now are going to have the price trajectory of some of those older booster boxes, it is hopefully obvious to people. I am continually like stunned by the fact that it doesn't seem obvious, or with those supply and demand factors. But that doesn't mean that it won't go up, because those went up so much. Those went up 20 to 30 times in value, right? You don't need these new boxes to do that, right? If you buy a modern Japanese box for like $70 and it goes to like 140, 210 in the next 5 years, like you're going to be extremely happy, from a investment like speculative perspective. It doesn't need to go to 2000, 1500 to 2000. And that gap, it's understandable why people continue to do it. Now, will so many people do it, or will they print so much more of it that it'll completely destroy the value and take it away? That has not happened yet. Is there a point where it likely will happen? I don't know. I think that Pokemon may be good enough to control the print run to the point where they let that not happen, or they keep sort of that supply at a good place where it doesn't happen, and where there's just continuously, generally speaking, decent like secondary market money to be made on modern sealed, and that's just like the new normal for a long period of time. And I think that's a decent argument. I just think nobody knows. And so I'm definitely not saying don't invest in this stuff, don't speculate on this stuff, you won't make money. But I'm also definitely not saying that it's like a guarantee. And I think people want to hear what I find that some people want to hear what they want to hear from me. Like some people, like they want to hear that I'm saying it's bad and you can't make money, or they want to hear that I'm saying it's like really good. And it's like I'm saying that both scenarios. I myself am buying some, but not a huge amount, and I buy it when I feel like it's really low. Like everything else, I'm trying to get stuff below market. I'm trying to buy it, as much of it as I can at once. I'm flipping some of it to take some of my risk and some of my money off the table, and all of that allows me to feel comfortable. I am not YOLOing $100,000 into every new set and just like putting it and keeping it in boxes, right? But even someone like Rudy, who's spending millions of dollars a year on sealed stuff, he is also selling millions of dollars a year and de-risking constantly by selling to patrons and by also charging them that $15 fee. Like he's made like there's all sorts of ways that he's making immediate money on this product, and it allows him to like offload it and sell it that a lot of other people do not have access to. And because of that, most people who do not have those channels to like sell and move product are paying eBay fees, are paying more on shipping fees, are paying are there and because of that free structure, they have to make even more. So you're already at quite a disadvantage from someone like that, or a TCA Gaming Rusty, or so just be aware of that if you're going to be doing this. John says, "How does Jake feel about the trajectory of holding the $80 booster boxes he bought last year?" Yeah, I mean, I sold most of them, and I have like a few left here that these are just like my display ones, and that maybe I'll eventually open for fun. I always keep like one of everything, um, uh, uh, unless like I mean, if this goes to like if some of these went to like jumped an insane amount more, I would even sell those. But for to make $100, I'm going to keep the one that I have. It's not worth selling it. And then I'm going to try to time the market on the next reprint and get it like $50 cheaper. It's not worth the headache for 50 to $100 for me. So this was about clarifying, am I not bullish? Yeah. I like, my goal on this channel is to like be realistic try my best to be like very realistic with people, and I want to help people who really want to be here and really enjoy this like have a really good time. And so I don't want to talk people out of like, I don't want to tell people like you're definitely going to lose money and you're stupid for putting any money into Pokemon and it's all ridiculous and it's not that fun. Like that's not how I feel. That's not my goal. But I also don't want to encourage people who maybe have a little bit of an addiction issue in this hobby. I don't want to be used, or my words to be used as like a justification that they should continue to buy a lot because, well, Jake's buying a lot and he knows what he's doing or whatever, so I'm going to do it too, and then we're all going to make, I'm very careful, and I think I've probably done this, and I know a lot of people give me feedback that I like pouring cold water on them a lot, which helps them buy less, which is probably a good thing overall. But at the end of the day, obviously, like I can only do my best, and people are responsible for themselves and for hearing. They're going to hear what I say in a lot of different ways. I can't control that. But yeah, certainly my aim is to encourage people who really want to be here to like to enjoy themselves and to figure out how to make it sustainable in the long run. It's not to discourage them from being here. That's certainly not my goal, is to discourage people. But I do think that in the long run, if you have an addiction issue in this hobby and you are way overspending with the justification that this is a good investment, you're actually going to burn yourself out and probably not be here a super long time. And I would much rather you buy slowly, enjoy yourself, hang out in the community, come to events, me meet you in person, and you say, I love this hobby and it's been super fun, than like be the person who like this hobby like takes a lot of their energy and like it leaves them in a bad place. And so if I can have an impact, like that's, I'd like to have a positive impact, obviously. Um, and one other thing I would add to that is that I think that for most people, it's natural to have some not. I was a therapist, for those who watch the channel. No, I was a social worker, a therapist for 10 years, and I wouldn't use the word. You're not clinically addicted. To use the word clinically addicted, you have to meet a number of criteria. But to use it more casually, I think all of us understand that like we get some dopamine rush and dopamine hit from the hunt and getting a good deal and selling and making money, and all of that can be somewhat addicting. It doesn't mean you have to quit the hobby for the vast majority of people. It doesn't mean you can't buy anything, but it also means that like trying to develop a little bit of self-control and a plan is vital to sort of enjoying this hobby and having it be like a fun stress reliever rather than something that contributes to your stress. And I think that's the goal. And to have patience. I think it's about patience. I don't think you have to sell everything at once if you're feeling like I'm overextended or I'm addicted. Maybe sell a few things, maybe buy a few things less. I think oftentimes, and I know this about myself too, I can overreact to sort of the moment. And I think we underestimate how much we can accomplish over a long period of time, having sort of a gradual approach of like being healthier, behaving in a healthier way, slowly selling things off, slowly buying more. I think being patient is key to sort of long term success in anything. Thoughts on the new card design matching the Japanese cards going forward? So I talked a little bit about this before, so I think I'll leave it at that. I know we're like a full hour behind in the chat, as we usually are on this channel. My apologies. Uh, so let's see. I'll skip that one just because I know I answered it before. Major difference of alt arts and gold source that EXR was printed way less than Pokemon was in a slump. Yeah, I just like it just feels very random. Like it's like these are cool cards that were low printed and these are cool cards that were low printed. So let's call them both like they're both gold stars. Like I didn't watch Danny's video. I've seen other people call it that. It just feels like it's like a marketing campaign to make them expensive. It feels like it's like maybe unintentional, and I'm fine with that. But I think you have to be careful doing that because I think actually people could end up getting hurt and not enjoying them as much. And they're not like the gold stars have a lot going for them that these could never possibly have going for them. Starting with the fact that they're so much lower printed, they're so much more difficult to grade. The booster product is so much more expensive, so much less of that's going to come on the market, and they're a lot older, and they're part of the original Nintendo cards, and they'll always be the original Nintendo cards ever printed, and they're the first like highest chase card from that era, which is the first ever. It's like rainbow rares and gold stars have the exact same amount in common, other than demand in people who are interested in them, than does like you pick anything that's hard that has that like 1 and 2 booster box pull rate. That's the only thing they have in common in my mind, and the fact that people really like them. Um, um, this is interesting. I have no idea Ancient Mew, but that would be interesting if they decide to change the Japanese in response at some point. Usually Japanese does their changes first, but uh, you'd think. But um, what are your thoughts on Expedition? Such low populations in PSA 9 and 10. Yeah, so Expedition has a few of the lowest pop hollows and all of Wizards of the Coast, and cards like the Doug Trio, crazy low. It used to be like a 9. There might have been another one graded. Might still be a 9. That was like the second lowest or third lowest of all. I think the lowest for a while was the Legendary Collection Blastoise, Dark Blastoise of Wizards of the Coast hollows. But whenever you get into the single digits, or even like the low to middle double digits, you are definitely some of the lowest pop hollows that you can have in Wizards of the Coast era. When you get into the middle generation, there are actually a lot of cards, a lot of hollows that only have 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 graded still. But Wizards of the Coast, there's likely more printed of all of those sets, and certainly there was a lot more graded because the price has always been higher. So the pop reports are a little more fleshed out, versus those middle gens where people are just starting to grade a lot of those cards now. So more will likely come back from those. So all right, so Expedition, phenomenal set subjectively. I love the E series. I think that they were doing some cool new things with the art. Some of the cards like the Feraligatr, the Blastoise, what they were doing with like water, what they were doing with sort of like the art styles there. Obviously, the Mew is one of my favorite cards in the hobby. That was the first ever English Mew set card, holo card, which is a cool thing. For Japanese, you had Mew originally in the fossil set, but not on the English side. I think that's a little cool thing to add. Mew's one of my favorite Pokemon. I think Mew's a fan favorite for most people. Otherwise, I mean, the Charizard, one of the lowest pop Charizards, and this a number have been graded that used to be lower. I think that used to be more like around like 27, 26 in PSA 10. I think now we're up to into the 30s or even into the low 40s. So more are coming out for sure, but still extremely low. Still the lowest pop WotC Charizard Hollow in PSA 10. Um, yeah, it's E series in general has held up pretty well relative to a lot of other things um, over the last few years. It went up quite a bit and it's held pretty well. It's sort of this just people who do like it really love it. There's just not a lot of it. There's not enough to go around. I think as long as Pokemon stays hot, it will do well. It will never be the first appearance cards like Base Set, Jungle, and Fossil. You know, it's never going to have quite the importance of those sets, in my opinion, in terms of the history of Pokemon. But it's still in the Wizards of Coast, and the quality of the art and the rarity of it makes it, to me, on the level of those original WotC sets in terms of collectability and value probably, and I think similar to sort of that original Nintendo EX era in terms of where I would put it as a value and collectability, similar to the EXs and the Gold Stars and some of the best regular hollows from that original Nintendo EX era. Some of my favorite things to collect in the hobby for sure. What is your 76 favorite card? So I made a video recently with like my 75 favorite cards, right? So 76, after I made that video, I realized there were so many cards that I left off that I wish I had put in or wanted to put in. So maybe I'll make another 75, 76 top cards that I didn't mention in that video at some point. But yeah, I don't know. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to just quickly kind of put that together. Definitely something I'm going to do every year at the end of the year. I'm going to just do a top, like the cards that I added to my collection that year, just as a way to do a non-market video that is just about collecting, just about what I enjoy to collect. We're not going to talk at all about prices, and I'm going to do my best not to go into prices and value in that video and just kind of showcase the progress I've made. I think it'll be, as the years go on, I'm going to make more and more progress, and I have the goal of creating a pretty unique kind of like one of a kind non-sports collection. And it'll be cool to, I will share it on this YouTube channel, with people as I go. Blaziken says you can get cheaper prices on sealed products if you join local groups. Yeah, I mean, I know people who have bought like, $80 Lost Origins, $75 Lost Origins when it was selling like pretty, from local groups or local people when it was selling like pretty regularly for like 100 on TCG Player and eBay. So certainly you can get cheaper prices on sealed product than you can on eBay, generally speaking, for sure. On eBay, the seller who's selling it to you is paying fees and shipping. So likely if you can buy from someone in person for sure, who's local or even through a Facebook group or Instagram or whatever to avoid those fees, they're going to be able to give you a more competitive price. What would you say is the best way to engage with an audience like YouTube, even if you don't have a chat to engage with? Yeah, I think you have to, in the beginning, like make those to camera videos, pre-recorded videos to sort of start to build an audience, of people who are interested in hearing your thoughts or, value your perspective. As you do that and show a commitment, you'll start to build more of an audience. And then when you have enough of an audience, you can start doing lives like this, where there's enough engagement in the chat and questions that like, it can, I can come in with, I want to talk for 30 minutes about a topic, and then this can end up going for like 3 hours because easily, or even longer, because there's plenty of engagement and people who are down to, ask great questions and just kind of hang out and chat with each other, which makes it so much more enjoyable for everyone. I find like, it really works well with this type of size where Of course, I'm way behind in chat, and I'll always be way behind in chat. But a lot of people are able to get their questions answered, and the chat isn't moving so quick that like no one can see what people are writing. And it's like mostly regulars, right? It's mostly people who a lot of people here are like friends. A lot of us have met in person. Pokebano says, I look forward to seeing where the Pokemon market goes. I will continue collecting what I enjoy and want to work on budgeting myself better this upcoming year. Me too. I'm always trying to like, and it's a constant like thing because there's a lot of stuff that I want to buy. There can be a lot of stuff I don't want to sell, but there at times I have to sell things I don't want to sell, and I have to not buy things that I want to buy. And when you have the longer game in mind and when you have the longer picture in mind, it becomes so much easier to kind of do that, rather than worrying so much about every purchase or but occasionally that rare item, that rare card, that rare collection is going to come up and it's like, man, I really need to get this. And I've bought those at times and I wouldn't say it was a mistake to buy those because I ended up either making money or adding really cool cards to my collection. But for a short period, it would put me in like a financial stress moment because, okay, I wasn't expecting to spend this much right now. Now I need to sell something that I wasn't expecting to sell. And how liquid is that item going to be? I can't just press a button and sell it immediately. Do I want to auction it? Because that'll automatically sell it, most likely, but I could get a lot less than I want for it. Or do I list a bunch of cards, hope some sell? It's definitely but if you can kind of embrace that, that's kind of all part of the fun. It's a challenge. It's a jigsaw puzzle, like building my collection. Cause I don't just have for those who have like, $100 million of cash in their bank, they could just come in and buy whatever they want. But for most of us, the joy is sort of that jigsaw puzzle of how do I build up my collection over time while like also hopefully having like more traditional assets and certainly taking care of yourself and your family and your basic needs first. All right, let's see what else we got here. Let's see here. Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think too, it's like being patient and getting good on those price points can really help with prices falling. Predictions on Gold Star prices in the future. I view Gold Star as very similar to E Series and somewhat similar to to your lower pop kind of gear Pokemon. PSA 10 hollows from WotC, even though they're different in terms of their supply fundamentals. They certainly have less supply than particularly early WotC, which has the most supply. But when you offset that with the fact that there's probably less demand for those, I view all of those things as sort of the same type of likely to probably do the same over time. Pokemon, if one of those things, I think they're all pretty optimized at this point. And so I don't, when people ask me like, should I buy these or should I buy the Gold Stars or should I buy the original EX cards or should I buy the E Series or should I buy, like, my honest answer is like, they're all really good. And for me, it would be more about like price point. Or they're all really bad if you're sort of more negative or critical on the future of Pokemon. But I think within Pokemon, if you like sort of and think Pokemon's gonna the market is overall gonna go up over time, I think they're all good. They're all really good. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. Do I think they'll ever reprint or make more? I have no idea if they'll ever reprint. I mean, obviously Pokemon has shown that they are reprinting cards and not just from base set, even though obviously base set Charizard they've done a couple of times now, but they've also reprinted different cards from different eras. Within they did reprint one of them, although they reprinted the version that is not in a regular set, but is in the what are they called? The oh my gosh, the Umbreon, which is in the what are those series called? Man, my brain is. I'm sure someone can say it for everyone. Let's see. Pop series. Now I'm remembering Pop Series. Um, so that's cool because although it's a reprint, the Pop Series actually isn't hollow, which is why you can't weigh those Pop Series packs, which is why they're really valuable. And for those who don't know, because you can actually some of those Pop Series packs may still contain and likely do still contain quite a few of those Umbreons and Espeons. But it's cool because they added a hollow to it, so it wasn't like an exact reprint in celebrations. And then they obviously added the Gold Star Greninja. Will they continue to add more Gold Stars in the future? They absolutely could. I really don't have a guess. Kind of no guarantee. So I think I'm going to go another 20 minutes or so. I'm going to really try to keep these to 2-ish hours and do more of them because I think that that's sort of a better win-win for me and for the audience. So let's see. I'm gonna try to rapid fire some of these questions, and I'm gonna try to take questions too from people who haven't asked one, if that's possible. How long before they re-release the Silver Warrior? They definitely could. You think Beckett is underrated for modern cards? I'm not a massive fan of Beckett, but I also have Beckett cards. I'm definitely a PSA guy for Pokemon, ideally, and then CGC behind that. Hey, B-Dude, nice to see you. Are you just going to Orlando collect a con, or will you be going back to Denver as well? I have no idea about Denver right now. I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling this year for like weddings and also for work. So I can definitely cannot commit. The only one that I'm definitely going to right now is Orlando. I'm hoping to go to the Houston one. Is it Houston or is it the Dallas one? And probably one other, maybe two others. It's all going to depend on timing. I think the Denver one's probably not until late again, so we'll have some time to decide. Obviously, like if everyone's going, it's going to be hard for me to avoid. It's going to be hard for me to resist. How many special delivery Zards does Jake add to his PC? I have one special delivery Zard in my PC. I was just watching your card addiction video. Yeah, I talked about that and covered that in that video. I think that just shared, like, without going into much detail, just sort of my experience with that. And I think it's something that it's good for all of us to support each other, and not overreact one way or another. I think it can be a painful subject, but I think it's better to figure out ways to like talk about it in a way that isn't so painful, because nobody wants anyone to suffer here, and no one wants anyone to like burn out and like and feel overwhelmed. And of course, that's inevitably going to happen to some extent. But over time, hopefully, people can sort that out for themselves, and they'll find kind of a over time sort of a healthy relationship with the hobby. And again, it's something I'm constantly working on. It's not like you ever arrive. Okay, so I think this is the Rusty thing, right? He's buying a boatload of them at like 35 to 40. Posted recent videos, which I basically stated that it's a modern play that has less risk as some of the other promo buyouts. I would trust Rusty. I mean, quite a bit more than like anything that he's making a massive play on. I think is like interesting. I definitely like check it out. If I were to be making this play, the first thing I would do is like check to see how many of them were on the market, like how many were on TCG Player, how many were on eBay. I like to be able to, if I'm doing a buyout, I like to be able to have enough money and reserves to buy a pretty large percentage. And a card like that, I think there's so many of them that it's very hard to do an effective buyout and really control that market. So I think you're really going to be at the whim of the demand and sort of how other people feel and think about it over time. I don't love that, more than a card that is quite a bit rare and you can own a larger percentage of them. And you can more kind of control the price or control that market. I think there's a decent chance it'll work out. I haven't followed this card enough to really know like where we're at in terms of the trend, in terms of the pricing, in terms of where it's at now. I think if your price point, again, the better that price point, the lower that price point, the the easier it is to kind of figure out ways to make a profit, whether that's by grading it and selling it, or selling the worst ones raw. When you buy a bunch of raw ones, and if you're able to get it below the market because you buy a bunch at one time, for example, you can take the good ones, you can take the kind of like the definite tens and maybe some nines, depending on what they're selling for, and you can grade those and sell those and flip those into the market. And then with the other ones, you can like resell them raw, maybe at around the price you bought them, and then you've made quite a bit of money, ideally. So there's lots of ways. It would really depend on what his thought process was. And the thing about a play like this, probably from Rusty, is he knows all of those options, and he's going to decide over time which way to go. And maybe he grades a bunch, and then he gets a bunch of tens and nines, and he actually likes the investment play on some of it, and so he actually holds some of it. He doesn't just flip it all. He flips some. He recoups a little bit of his investment immediately, and then holds some because he thinks that they're undervalued right now, and he believes that in a year or 2 years from now, they're going to be quite a bit higher. Rusty's been very successful. It doesn't mean that and he'll be the first to tell you, it doesn't mean that he doesn't make mistakes, or he doesn't, at times buy modern cards I think that him and other people, I think there's risk to this for sure. But I definitely don't think it's, I would trust people like Rusty and Dan generally. They're going to make more money. They're going to make money more than they're not. And someone like Rusty also has the benefit of having good relationship with eBay and the fees that he pays, and having a big platform where he can sell some of them, and knowing all of the different selling platforms so that he can like liquidate them fairly quickly if he changes his mind. Your average person may not have those benefits. So just something to keep in mind if you're kind of like copying, sort of what someone like Rusty might do. Cartel Era says, just wanted to thank you for your expertise and experiences. Finding you watching Rainy Day and learn a lot of cool info to pass on to customers. Thanks, man. Yeah, Rainy Day is the man. Doing those podcasts with both Rainy Day and Wolf of 10th Street. Chris is awesome, also awesome guy. Some of the highlights of my hobby experience, honestly, those are like special to me. Those were special conversations and videos for me, and just hanging out with those guys. They just love the hobby, and it's like talking to people like that is so enjoyable. But I'm also glad that I'm glad you find this channel valuable, and yeah, really appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time to say something. Do you think it's good for the hobby to have Gary pushing Logan's name as a positive, given what he's done? This is way outside of what I know. So I haven't been paying attention. If has Logan been or Gary been defending Logan? I have heard of sort of this like Logan, and to be honest with you, because I'm like pretty into the crypto space, not as an all-in buyer and investor, and into the NFT space, but more from a perspective like I find it super interesting, like what people are willing to pay for these things and sort of the psychology around it. Like I've been aware of CryptoZoo like since its beginning, and so it's been interesting, but now I know like CoffeeZilla, right, made a video, and like it's a much more public thing talking about sort of what may have happened. CoffeeZilla may be right about everything. He may have like absolutely nailed the guy, and we'll see what Logan has to say, or he is wrong on a number of things and he's only getting part of the story. Who knows, right? Like I think internet detectives and someone on YouTube like doing journalism detective work is really cool. But I also like, just like any journalist or any like detective work, like it doesn't mean they're getting all the facts so that they're necessarily right. And unless I see something with my own eyes and I really know the situation, I tend not to be someone who's like, let's take out the pitchforks to like any person. I do not know Logan at all. I don't particularly feel like Logan is someone who I have seen a lot of evidence of him like being this like wonderful guy personally. Gary talks very glowingly about him. Gary's been on my channel before and talked glowingly about Logan. Gary has a personal relationship with Logan, and I would just like respect that like they have a relationship, and like probably Logan's been like really great to Gary, and but I have no relationship with Logan, so I certainly am not going to sit here and say like I think Logan's a great guy, or that I think like people need to I guess my perspective is just with anything internet related or anything news related, media related, try not to like my advice or not even advice, just like my way of doing things for myself is just like it's interesting, it's entertaining, and take it with a grain of salt. And then if a legal system gets involved and charges are actually, we have to hope that like our media and our entertainment, we have to hope we would love it for it to be really accurate, right? But what we really hope is that the legal system is accurate. And of course, we could say, well, legal system is rigged and all these types of things, and that may or may not be right. But the hope is like if something really bad happened here, like Logan gets sued and he pays some sort of penalty and uh, as far as like people getting scammed or not getting scammed, I don't know if people got scammed. I don't know if like Logan actually lied to people and there was any sort of fraud, or if it was just like these guys like trusted Logan and trusted an NFT and they wanted to get rich and they put their money into it and they lost their money, and it's like on them. At the end of the day, like if you think that if you invest a lot of money in anyone or any influencer, and unless they lied to you and they were really like saying things that were really fraudulent, like it's on you. You agreed to invest that money. Now, it can also be on the influencer if the influencer is like a jerk and doesn't explain the risks and oversells it. And is it likely that Logan did that? I think it's like it'd be pretty surprising if Logan didn't oversell this project. I mean, I've seen clips of Logan saying all sorts of things that are super positive about this project that like never seem to have happened. I think no matter what, like, that's not the best. That's not the best look. Like, I think when you're marketing something that that people could lose money on, it's good to be like, hey, be careful. There are risks to this, and rather than just being like, this is amazing, you're going to make a ton of money, you're going to have a ton of fun. So that's my ramble about that specific situation. But again, I've no firsthand knowledge, and like everything else on the internet, it's a lot of it is just entertainment, and it's unclear even if like Logan and CoffeeZilla and like lots of other people are using this for like entertainment and clicks and engagement. Um, so we'll see where it all goes. It's all very interesting. Um, and as far as Gary, like Gary's only been wonderful to me, and kind and supportive of me, and if he's not kind and supportive to someone else, that's unfortunate. But with me, he has been. So it's hard for me I certainly have no interest in saying anything negative about the guy. Um, you know, Although when I will. I mean, if he does something egregious, I am willing to say, tell the truth about people from my perspective. Um, let's see. So we're gonna do. So I'm gonna skip to the bottom, um, and we'll do a few more questions at the bottom. Um, for those who are here. So if you do have a quick question, go for it. So let's see. I thought it was interesting that Logan worked with the same guy, Crypto King, again after he scammed Logan on the base of Booster Rex. Yeah, listen, a lot of those conversations that like CoffeeZilla included in that video, and obviously like I think that Jake, the Crypto King guy, like he got a little bit too much hate for like the Bulbasaur comment, because what he actually said was that he thought a black label might go for that price, but he kind of mumbled it, and most people don't understand it. Like actually at that time, if you had actually gotten a black label of that card, it is possible it could have gone for that much. It probably still wouldn't have gone for that much, but like if it was going for like 4,000 to 5,000 in a PSA 10, could it have gone for 40,000 a black label? Maybe. It probably shouldn't have, but that was an insane time. It still was a stupid thing to say, and it was kind of dishonest and misleading. And now it's become a giant meme. As far as like the other thing he did of like selling that fake box to what's it called? Dumb Money. I have no idea how if he was cheating people or not cheating people on that. Obviously, the whole thing seemed like the way he speaks and the way he talks, like it does. I understand how it can come across as like he's like a bit of a grifter and like he's very like money focused and like when you smell when you know with smoke there may be fire, type of thing. But it's like again, we're all just like internet, right? We're all on the internet, and it's hard to judge someone without knowing them, meeting them. He could just be like super awkward and like not good at like he might just come off like way worse than he actually is, or he's a super scummy guy and like a liar, and so is Logan and all these people, and they're all terrible. It's it's probably not worth too much of our time. um, I definitely would not trust any of these people. Like I would never be a business partner with any of these people, unless I mean, maybe with someone like Logan because the opportunity might be so immense. But it would have to be. I would have to have like such good legal, and maybe I just never would be because like the ridiculous hassle and stress of that type of thing. But like, yeah, I mean, I try to pick people who I believe are like very grounded and trustworthy and have a good track record of treating people well, and where most people in their orbit like say that they're you know um, have been a good person to them. Honesty and loyalty and these types of things mean a lot to me in a business partner, and clearly, and it's not been a good track record. These relationships. I just find it fascinating. Appreciate your input. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely entertaining and fascinating for sure. I'm watching. It was shady looking to say the least. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was my reaction as a human being is like, gee, like this is weird and shady, and I don't want to be a part of any of it. For sure. Um, do you own any of the Mario and Luigi Ponchu Pikachu cards in your collection? Do you think they will make more? So to be honest, I have sold those. I just don't value them as much as the market does. I did buy quite a few of them over the years, and I do still have like some of the boxes that I opened where they came from. I do have a number of the other Ponchus I still have. Yeah, I think they're cool cards. I think they're very cool cards. They're definitely among the best, Pikachu promos in the hobby, and Pikachu promos are extremely, popular. I just think that Pikachu promos are like really highly priced compared to where I personally value them as a collector. But that's very subjective. That's not you know, investment or speculative, a speculation opinion. Um, New to PSA, if my card has a slight curve, will it still get a 9 at least, or should I just lay a hardcover book on the card for a week? So, I don't think there's a definite answer to this. I have certainly sent in cards that had a somewhat of a curve, that have graded 10s or 9s for sure, and it didn't take away from it at all. You definitely want to make sure that it's not that there's no crease on the card. I assume there isn't, by what you're talking about here, because sometimes curves can be so intense that like there's actually slight creases or damage to the surface from the curve. If it's a very slight curve, shouldn't be an issue. But if you want to put it, in a top loader, put it in a book, put it under a book, that can help. Uh, but yeah, but it's not something, I've sent in cards that have had that, and it's been fine. But you just never know 100%, and you never know with every grader, right? So it's better probably to not have it and be sure about it. Okay. So let's start to end the video there. Really appreciate all of you as always. Thanks for hanging out. Happy New Year to everyone. This month for the Patreon, Dan will be doing a presentation. If you wanna be involved in that or be involved in the Discord, I will have a link to our Patreon below. It's not there right now, but I will put it. Actually, I might not be able to put it now because I don't have access to my computer, but I will put it at some point. Um, Otherwise, yeah, just gonna make more videos. Hope you guys are all enjoying the hobby, enjoying being here, making progress on your collections, and having a good time. Um, uh, what else? I guess that's it. Yeah, if you can take a moment to subscribe to the channel. I would love like my personal goal. It doesn't mean so much, but like my personal goal would be to hit 10,000 subscribers. It would just be like a personal cool milestone. If you could take a minute to subscribe, I would appreciate that. Like the video, support on Patreon, click the affiliate link, all that stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, take care, everyone.